My daughter left her 5-year-old autistic son at my door and never came back. That was 11 years ago. I raised Lucas myself. Everyone said he'd never succeed. Too different. Too difficult. They were wrong. By 16, he'd built software worth $3.2 million. Then the news covered his story. 2 weeks later, my doorbell rang. Rebecca, my daughter, standing there with a lawyer and documents claiming she'd been involved the whole time. Custody papers, financial records, visit logs, all lies, but they looked real. Our lawyer reviewed them and said without proof they're forged, we might lose. I panicked. Lucas didn't. He leaned over and whispered, "Let her talk." I stared at him. We were about to lose everything and he wanted her to keep lying, but he just sat there calm watching, and I had no idea what he was about to do. My name is Margaret. I am 68 years old, and this is my story. Before we continue, please leave a comment telling us where you're watching from and subscribe to Never Too Old channel. We're creating a community of people who know that our best chapters can happen at any age. Now back to the story. Rebecca showed up on a Friday in November 2010 with Lucas and one backpack. "Just for the weekend, Mom," she said at my front door. "I need a break, please." Lucas stood beside her, 5 years old, staring at the porch floor. He rocked back and forth, heel to toe. His hands covered his ears, even though we weren't making noise. "Rebecca, what's going on?" My daughter wouldn't meet my eyes. "Nothing. I'll call you Sunday." She was already turning away, walking fast toward her car. She didn't hug Lucas, didn't kiss him goodbye, just left. I watched her taillights disappear down the street. Lucas kept rocking. I'd taught elementary school for 35 years, had a few autistic students mainstreamed into my class over the decades, always with aides and specialists handling the hard parts. But standing there with my grandson, I realized I knew almost nothing about actually living with it. "Hey, Lucas," I said softly, "want to come inside?" He didn't look at me, didn't move, just rocked. I picked up his backpack. It was light, too light for a weekend stay. I opened the door wider, waited. After a minute, Lucas walked past me into the house, still covering his ears. The refrigerator hummed. He flinched. The heater clicked on. He pressed his hands tighter to his head. I closed the door as quietly as I could. He was already in the living room, crouched in the corner by the bookshelf. "Are you hungry?" No response. "Thirsty." He rocked faster. I went to the kitchen, poured water in a yellow plastic cup I kept for when he visited. Those visits were rare, maybe twice a year, always short. I brought the cup to him, set it on the floor, an arm's length away. He stopped rocking, looked at the cup, then went back to rocking. That first night was worse. I made chicken nuggets and fries for dinner because Rebecca once told me that's what he ate. Lucas took one look at the plate and turned away. I tried pasta. No, I tried a sandwich. He pushed it across the table. "What do you want to eat?" I asked. He hummed a low sound in his throat and stared at the wall. I gave him crackers. He ate 3. Bedtime was a disaster. I tried to help him brush his teeth and he screamed, not crying, screaming like I was hurting him. I stepped back and he stopped, but he was shaking. "Okay," I said. "Okay, you can skip it tonight." I put him in the guest room, tucked the blanket around him the way I thought kids liked. He threw it off. I tried again. He screamed. I left the blanket at the foot of the bed and backed out of the room. He didn't sleep. I could hear him humming all night, that same low sound over and over. I didn't sleep either. Saturday morning I called Rebecca. No answer. Left a message. "Rebecca, honey, call me back. I need to know what Lucas eats, what his routines are." She didn't call. I called again Saturday night, Sunday morning, Sunday night. Nothing. 1 week became 2. I took Lucas to the pediatrician. The doctor confirmed what I already suspected. "He's autistic. Mrs. Wilson, has anyone talked to you about getting him evaluated? His mother was supposed to handle that." The doctor nodded slowly. "Well, you're handling it now. I enrolled him in therapy. Speech occupational behavioral. I learned he needed the same breakfast every single day. Scrambled eggs toast cut corner to corner, nothing touching on the plate. I learned the route to therapy had to be exactly the same or he'd scream in the car. I learned not to touch him unless he initiated it. I got good at watching instead of doing. 2 weeks after Lucas arrived, I found him in the living room at dawn. He was on the floor with a bin of toy cars I'd bought him, lining them up in a perfect row, but it wasn't random. He'd arranged them by color, but in a way I couldn't understand at first. I sat on the couch and watched. Red car, then one that was slightly more orange, then one more orange than the last, then yellow green, on and on. This gradient so subtle I had to squint to see the differences. He'd organized them by shade perfectly. "That's amazing, Lucas," I said. He didn't look at me, but he kept arranging. December came. Rebecca still hadn't called. I tried a different approach with Lucas. I stopped trying to get him to look at me, stopped pushing him to talk. I just made sure everything was the same every single day. Same breakfast, same time, same shows on TV, same bedtime routine that he'd finally tolerated, which was just me saying goodnight from the doorway. He calmed down, not happy but less frantic. He'd sit in the living room with me while I read. He'd eat meals without pushing the plate away. On Christmas Eve, I made sugar cookies. Lucas didn't help, but he sat at the table and watched me cut shapes. The kitchen smelled like vanilla and butter. The phone rang. I grabbed it, hoping. Rebecca. "Mom," her voice was flat, tired. "Rebecca, thank God. When are you coming to get him? He needs you. I need to know." "I can't do this anymore, Mom." I stopped moving. He's yours. I tried. I really tried, but I can't." Her voice cracked. "I just can't." "Rebecca, wait." The line went dead. I called back. It rang and rang. No answer. I tried again. Voicemail. I stood there in the kitchen with the phone in my hand, the cookies burning in the oven smoke starting to curl up. I turned off the oven, pulled out the tray. The cookies were black. I sat down on the floor, just sat there with my back against the cabinet. Lucas appeared in the doorway. He looked at me for a long moment longer than he'd ever looked at me before. Then he walked to the counter, picked up the yellow cup I'd given him that first day, and brought it to me. He set it on the floor beside me. I looked at the cup, looked at him. He went back to the living room. I cried, sitting there on the kitchen floor with a burnt cookie sheet in a yellow plastic cup. I didn't know it then, but that cup would become the symbol of our relationship. His way of connecting when words failed. The next day I went through the backpack again. A few clothes, a small dinosaur toy, a folder with medical papers. At the bottom, a letter. "Mom, I can't handle this. I've tried for 5 years, but it's too much. He doesn't talk. He doesn't look at me. He screams at night. I need a life. I'm sorry." It wasn't signed, just a note scribbled on a piece of notebook paper. It felt final. Lucas had no other family. His father had disappeared before he was born. No name even on the birth certificate. Rebecca and I were his only family, and now it was just me. I was 57, retired after 3 decades of teaching, planning to travel, maybe date again, maybe move to a smaller place. Now I had a 5-year-old autistic grandson who barely acknowledged my existence. I called my closest friends. Donna brought over casseroles and said, "Oh, Margaret," in that sympathetic tone people use at funerals. Jerry, retired from the same school district, offered to help find resources. Sarah, my college roommate who'd stayed single all her life, came for a weekend to give me a break. Lucas screamed when she tried to give him breakfast. She left early. January came cold and gray. Lucas started kindergarten at the local elementary school, the same one where I'd taught. They had a special education program, not great, but it was something. The first day, he wouldn't get out of the car. I had to carry him in, him rigid as a board, me whispering, it's okay," while the other parents tried not to stare. His teacher, Ms. Chen, was young, enthusiastic, overwhelmed. "He's not participating, Mrs. Wilson. He won't join circle time. He won't use the materials." I nodded, exhausted. "He needs more support than we can provide." I nodded again, not knowing what to say or do. The school wanted him evaluated for an IEP, individualized education program. More meetings, more assessments, more people telling me what Lucas couldn't do. February, I turned 58. No party. Lucas had a meltdown because I bought the wrong brand of orange juice. I sat on the kitchen floor again that night, but this time no yellow cup appeared. Lucas was in his room under his bed, not making a sound. I realized I hadn't heard my own name in over a month. No one to say Margaret in conversation. No one to say Mom. Just Mrs. Wilson at school meetings, ma'am at stores. I felt invisible. March. April. May. We found a rhythm. Lucas still didn't speak, but he started making sounds that meant things. A hum that meant he was hungry. A different pitch that meant he needed the bathroom. I learned to interpret his language. The school wasn't helping much, but I found an autism support group that met Tuesday nights at the library. I'd leave Lucas with Mrs. Peters from next door, the only person he'd tolerate besides me, and go listen to other parents talk about their challenges. Their children spoke. Their children hugged them. Their children melted down in different ways. I felt both connected and isolated. Summer came. Lucas turned 6. No party for that either. He couldn't handle the noise, the change in routine, the expectation to engage. Instead, I put a candle in his breakfast toast, sang quietly, blew it out myself, when he didn't. Later, I found the candle lined up with his cars precisely in the color gradient where yellow-orange should be. It was around then that I noticed Lucas watching me more. Not looking at me watching. From the corner of his eye, through his lashes, quick glances when he thought I wasn't paying attention. He was studying me, learning me the way he learned his car colors. One morning in July, I was in the garden pulling weeds in the early coolness before the day's heat. The soil was dark and crumbly between my fingers, reminding me of my childhood on my grandfather's farm. I didn't hear Lucas come outside, didn't know he was there until I felt a tap on my shoulder that made me jump. He stood there in his blue pajamas, rigid eyes on the ground, holding out a piece of paper. It was a drawing, crude circles and lines in crayon, but unmistakably 2 figures, a tall one with gray scribbles for hair, a small one with brown. He'd drawn us. I took it carefully, tears blurring my vision. "Thank you, Lucas." He didn't respond, just turned and went back inside. I sat in the dirt and cried again, but different tears this time. The drawing went on the refrigerator, the first real connection. By the time school started again in the fall, Lucas had a proper diagnosis and an IEP. Autism spectrum disorder, level 2, requires substantial support, limited verbal communication, sensory processing issues. The words felt clinical, reducing my complex, fascinating grandson to a series of deficits. But the designation brought help, a classroom-aid speech therapy at school accommodations for his sensory needs. First grade was better. Ms. Washington was experienced with autistic children, patient creative. "He has a mathematical mind," she told me at our first conference. "He arranged all the counting blocks by prime numbers. I didn't even realize what he was doing until I counted them." Pride swelled in my chest. "Does he talk at home?" she asked. I shook my head. "Not in words, but he communicates." I told her about the yellow cup, the drawing the car gradient. She nodded. "Those are communications. He's telling you things." The school psychologist was less positive. "Mrs. Wilson, I have concerns about Lucas's progress. He's falling further behind his peers socially, and frankly, I'm concerned about your situation." I stiffened. "My situation? She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "You're his grandmother. Raising a child with autism is exhausting for young parents with support. At your age alone," I cut her off. "I taught in this district for 35 years. I know exactly what I'm capable of at my age." The words came out sharper than I intended. The psychologist's face flushed. She didn't bring it up again, but I saw it in the faces of other teachers, other parents. The doubt, the concern. Poor old Mrs. Wilson taking on more than she can handle. Winter came again. Lucas still didn't speak, but he started using a tablet at school to communicate. Simple buttons want need, yes, no. He rarely used it at home. He had other ways to tell me things. A car placed on the kitchen counter meant he was hungry. His dinosaur on my book meant he wanted me to read to him. The yellow cup, now slightly chipped, placed by my bed, meant he'd had a bad dream. The routines continued. Same breakfast, same route to school, same shows, same bedtime. But within the sameness, I began to see growth. He would sit beside me on the couch now, not touching, but close. He would bring me things he found interesting, a leaf with an unusual pattern, a rock with a stripe through it, a page from a magazine with a particularly vivid photo. His way of sharing his world. Spring then, summer again. Lucas was 7. I was 59, feeling older. My knees hurt when I gardened. I fell asleep in my chair more often. The autism support group became a lifeline. I'd sit there Tuesday nights listening to younger parents offering what wisdom I could, receiving their support in return. "How do you do it, Margaret?" Tracy asked one night. She was 32 with an 8-year-old autistic son and a supportive husband. "All alone at Elm." She stopped, embarrassed. "At my age," I smiled to show no offense taken. "One day at a time, just like you." The truth was more complicated. Some days I wasn't sure I could do it. Some days the silence in the house pressed down like a weight. Some days I missed adult conversations so much it was a physical ache. Some days I thought about my interrupted retirement, the trips not taken, the life not lived. But then Lucas would place a car in my hand, always red my favorite color, though I'd never told him, and I'd remember that I was the only person in the world who understood his language, the only one who could translate his needs to others, the only constant in his disrupted life. I couldn't leave him. Wouldn't. That fall 3rd grade brought new challenges. The academic gap between Lucas and his peers widened. He could do complex math calculations in his head, but couldn't write a simple sentence. He memorized entire books, but couldn't answer basic comprehension questions. His IEP meetings grew longer, more people around the table, more concerns raised. Have you considered a more structured environment for Lucas? The district special education coordinator's voice was gentle, but her implication clear. They wanted him in a specialized program, away from the mainstream. He's making progress, I insisted. He's connected to his current school. The coordinator exchanged glances with the principal. Mrs. Wilson, we understand your attachment, but at your age, the demands of supporting a child with such significant needs. There it was again. My age. The unspoken question, how much longer can she do this? I sat straighter in my chair. I appreciate your concern for my well-being, but Lucas stays where he is unless you can demonstrate that another placement would better serve his needs, not your convenience. Years of teacher union negotiations had taught me how to stand my ground. They backed down for the moment. At home, I worried. They weren't entirely wrong. How long could I do this? What would happen to Lucas if something happened to me? There was no one else. I updated my will naming Jerry as guardian, though he was only 8 years younger than me. I started a special needs trust with my modest savings and teacher's pension. I documented Lucas's routines, preferences, communication methods in a binder labeled If I'm Gone. The worry must have shown because Lucas started bringing me things more often. A smooth stone, a perfect leaf, the red car again and again. His way of saying, I'm here. His way of giving comfort. Winter turned to spring, turned to summer. Lucas was 8, then 9. I was 61, then 62. The routine continued the same, but different. Lucas's communication expanded more tablet use, a few spoken words, though never in public, a system of gestures we developed together. He started drawing more intricate patterns that revealed his view of the world. It was around this time I noticed his fascination with my computer. I'd kept my old desktop from before retirement, used it mainly for email and simple games. Lucas would watch from the doorway when I typed, his eyes tracking the screen, the keyboard, my fingers. One day I turned and found him sitting at the desk while I was in the kitchen, pressing keys, cautiously watching the letters appear. I remembered Ms. Washington's words about his mathematical mind. The next day I brought home a children's coding program from the school library. Would you like to try this, Lucas? I set it up, showed him the basics, then stepped back. He took to it like a fish to water. Within weeks, he'd completed all the beginner exercises. I bought more advanced programs. He devoured them. For the first time, he seemed truly engaged, truly motivated. He still didn't speak much, still had meltdowns, still needed his routines, but he'd found a medium that made sense to him. A language that followed logical rules. A world where his different way of thinking was an asset, not a deficit. By the time Lucas was 10, he could program simple games and animations. I knew enough from my teaching days to recognize that his skills went beyond what was typical for his age, even for neurotypical children. When I mentioned it at an IEP meeting, suggesting that programming might be incorporated into his education plan, I was met with skepticism. Let's focus on the basics, Mrs. Wilson, the new special education coordinator said. Lucas still struggles with writing and social interaction. I fought back. This is a strength, a significant strength. We should be building on it. With all due respect, the coordinator said in a tone that conveyed the opposite. At your age, you might not fully understand current educational technology priorities. The dismissal was clear. I was just an old woman with an outdated understanding of education. After the meeting, Lucas's science teacher, Mr. Davis, approached me in the hallway. I heard him talking today, he said without preamble. I stopped walking. Talking Lucas. To the computer, not to me, Mr. Davis clarified. During free time, he was using the classroom computer coding something. He was talking through the problem, complete sentences, complex vocabulary. He looked at me intently. Mrs. Wilson, I don't think they understand what they're dealing with. Lucas isn't just good at coding. He's exceptional. That night, I sat at the kitchen table long after Lucas went to bed, thinking about Mr. Davis's words. Exceptional. But exceptional How exceptional enough to overcome his challenges. Exceptional enough to build a future for himself. Exceptional enough to survive when I was gone. One Saturday morning, I woke at dawn to find Lucas's bed empty. Panic surged through me until I heard the faint sound of typing from the living room. He sat cross-legged on the floor, my laptop balanced on his knees, fingers flying over the keys. I watched silently from the doorway. He'd created a program to organize his daily schedule. Not just a simple calendar, a complex system that accounted for variables like weather, my energy levels. How did he assess those and upcoming school events? It adjusted automatically, providing the structure he craved, but with flexibility built in. It was remarkable. "Lucas," I said softly, "this is amazing." He didn't look up, but his typing slowed. Acknowledgement. "Did you make this to help me keep track of our schedule?" A slight nod, eyes still on the screen. He'd made it for me. To ease my burden. To create order. My heart felt too large for my chest. At 10 years old, largely nonverbal, socially isolated, he was thinking of ways to help me. That day I made a decision. The school might not recognize Lucas's exceptional abilities, but I would. I contacted Mr. Davis, who put me in touch with a colleague at the community college who taught computer science. After reviewing some of Lucas's work, the professor agreed to meet with us. Dr. Thomas Reynolds was in his mid-60s, tall and lanky, with a gray beard and glasses that kept sliding down his nose. He welcomed us to his cluttered office with awkward formality. "Mrs. Wilson, and you must be Lucas." Lucas stared at the floor, rocking slightly. "He doesn't speak much," I explained, "especially with strangers." "Completely understandable," Dr. Reynolds said, pushing his glasses up. "I don't particularly enjoy speaking with strangers either, or most people really." He turned to his computer. "Lucas, would you like to see what I'm working on?" To my surprise, Lucas approached the desk, still not making eye contact, but clearly interested. Dr. Reynolds showed him a program he was developing, explaining the code in a matter-of-fact way, not talking down to him. Lucas watched intently. After a few minutes, he reached for the keyboard. "May I?" The words were so quiet, I almost missed them. Dr. Reynolds nodded, sliding the keyboard toward him. Lucas typed quickly, changing a section of the code. Dr. Reynolds watched, eyebrows rising. "Well," he said when Lucas finished, "that is significantly more elegant than my solution." He looked at me. "Mrs. Wilson, your grandson has a remarkable mind." Over the following months, Lucas began meeting with Dr. Reynolds once a week. Not formal lessons, just time spent coding together. Lucas still struggled at school, still had meltdowns, still needed strict routines at home, but he'd found a mentor who understood his language, both the verbal and the coded. When Lucas was 12, he came home from one of these sessions and immediately went to his computer. He worked through dinner, through bedtime, through my increasingly firm requests to stop. Finally, at midnight, I put my foot down. "Lucas, whatever you're doing will still be there tomorrow. You need sleep." He looked up at me, the first direct eye contact in days. "It's important," he said. 2 words, but weighted with urgency. "What is it? What are you working on that's so important it can't wait until morning?" He turned the screen toward me. Lines of code filled the display, meaningless to me. "It's a verification system." He said the most words I'd heard from him in weeks. "To know if things are real." "Real, what do you mean, digital things? Documents, photos, videos?" He turned back to the screen. "People lie. Code doesn't." I wanted to ask more, to understand what had triggered this sudden focus, but Lucas had already retreated back into his world of code. I left him working, checking periodically until he finally fell asleep at the keyboard around 3 a.m. I draped a blanket over him and went to my own bed, puzzled. The next day at school, I found out what had happened. A group of 7th graders had created fake social media messages that appeared to come from Lucas saying inappropriate things about classmates. When confronted, Lucas couldn't defend himself verbally, couldn't explain that the messages weren't his. He'd been suspended for 3 days before a tech-savvy teacher discovered the forgery. That was the beginning of Lucas's verification system. What started as a way to prove authorship of digital messages evolved into something more complex. He worked on it obsessively, refining, expanding, testing. Dr. Reynolds guided him, impressed by the sophistication of what Lucas was creating. "It's not just the technical skill that's remarkable," he told me during one of our check-ins. "It's the insight. Lucas understands something fundamental about truth and verification that many adults miss. In a world increasingly full of digital manipulation, He's building a tool to find solid ground. By the time Lucas was 14, the verification system had become a comprehensive tool that could analyze digital documents for authenticity, identifying alterations, verifying signatures, timestamps, and metadata. I didn't fully understand how it worked, but I understood its importance to Lucas. It was his shield against a confusing world, his way of creating certainty. That summer, Dr. Reynolds suggested Lucas enter his project in the Regional Science and Technology Fair. "He's created something genuinely innovative," he insisted. "People should see this." I was hesitant. Lucas still struggled in social situations, still had meltdowns when routines were disrupted. A crowded fair with noise lights and strangers seemed like a recipe for disaster. But when I raised these concerns with Lucas, he surprised me. "I want to do it," he said, looking at a point just past my shoulder. "It's important." We prepared meticulously. We visited the venue beforehand, mapped out quiet areas where Lucas could retreat if needed, practiced his presentation, though I doubted he'd be able to deliver it to strangers. Dr. Reynolds helped create the technical documentation that would explain the project if Lucas couldn't. The day of the fair arrived. Lucas wore noise-canceling headphones and clutched the red toy car in his pocket, his talisman. I stayed beside him, ready to intervene, to translate, to protect. We set up his display, mostly technical diagrams, and a computer demonstration, minimal text. Then we waited. The judges came in a group of 3, a university professor, a tech industry professional, and a science teacher from another district. They approached Lucas's booth, and I felt him tense beside me. I stepped forward, ready to explain, but Lucas moved first. "This is a digital document verification system," he said, his voice quiet but clear. The judges leaned in to hear. "It analyzes metadata, editing history, and digital signatures to detect forgery or manipulation." He turned to the computer and began demonstrating, his hands steady, his explanation precise. I stood frozen in amazement. Lucas spoke for almost 10 minutes, the longest sustained speech I'd ever heard from him. He answered questions, demonstrated features, explained technical details. There were awkward pauses, moments when he retreated into silence, instances where he had to start over when interrupted. But he did it. When the judges finally moved on, Lucas collapsed into his chair, exhausted but accomplished. That evening they announced the winners. Lucas received second place in the computer science division and a special innovation award from a local tech company. As they called his name, he couldn't go to the stage, the crowd, the applause too much. I accepted on his behalf, tears in my eyes. A man approached us afterward as we prepared to leave. "Mrs. Wilson, I'm Daniel Chen, CTO at Anderson Security." He handed me a business card. "I'd like to talk to you and Lucas about his verification system. It has commercial potential." I looked at Lucas, overwhelmed and shutting down after the long day. "Perhaps another time," I said. "Of course," Mr. Chen smiled. "Call me when it's convenient. What Lucas has created, it's exceptional. We'd be very interested in discussing acquisition or development." In the car driving home, Lucas pressed his forehead against the window, the lights of passing cars reflecting on his face. "You did it," I said softly. "You showed them what you can do. They understood," he whispered, more to himself than to me. "They saw it was real." The following weeks brought meetings with Anderson Security. Lucas couldn't attend most of them, too many people, too much uncertainty. But Mr. Chen was patient, willing to work around Lucas's needs. Dr. Reynolds helped us navigate the technical and legal aspects. It became clear that what Lucas had created was not just innovative, but valuable, potentially very valuable. The negotiations continued through the fall and into winter. Lucas turned 15, still working on his system, refining, improving. I turned 68, worrying about the future, about what this potential deal might mean for Lucas, about whether I was making the right decisions on his behalf. In January, Anderson Security made a formal offer, $3.2 million for Lucas's verification system, with Lucas retained as a consultant to help integrate and further develop the technology. The amount stunned me. Lucas, when I told him, nodded as if he'd expected it. "Do you understand what this means?" I asked him. "This money, it could secure your future. It could pay for college, for support services, for whatever you need, even if—" I couldn't finish the sentence. "Even if I'm not here." "I understand," Lucas said, "but I'm not finished with it." "What do you mean?" "The system. It's not complete. There's more to do. In the end, we negotiated a deal that allowed Lucas to continue working on his system while Anderson Security began implementing the current version. The paperwork was signed in February. The money went into Lucas's special needs trust with provisions for his education support and future. The local newspaper ran a story about the young coding prodigy whose innovative verification system had been acquired for millions. It was a small piece buried in the technology section, but it was enough. 2 weeks after it was published, the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find Rebecca standing there, almost unrecognizable. Gone was the uncertain young woman who had left Lucas with me 11 years earlier. This Rebecca wore an expensive suit, perfect makeup-styled hair, and beside her stood a man in an even more expensive suit holding a leather portfolio. "Mom," Rebecca said, her voice confident, practiced. "We need to talk about Lucas." "Lucas hacked the school's computer system." The principal's voice came through my phone, tight with anger. I set down my grocery bags on the kitchen counter, milk and bread forgotten. "He did what yet?" "The IT department detected unauthorized access to our secure network. They traced it back to Lucas's student account." The accusation hung heavy unspoken. "Your grandson is a criminal." My heart raced as I tried to make sense of this. Lucas, who struggled to order food at a restaurant, somehow breaking into secure systems. There must be some mistake. Lucas wouldn't, Mrs. Wilson, we have digital evidence, unless someone else was using his credentials. I glanced toward Lucas's room where he sat with headphones on coding as he did every afternoon after school. "I need to speak with him. We'll come in tomorrow morning." That night I confronted Lucas. He didn't deny it, didn't even look surprised at being caught. Instead, he turned his laptop toward me, showing lines of code and what looked like a security report. "There was a vulnerability in their firewall," he said quietly, the most direct sentence he'd spoken all week. "Anyone could access student records, medical information, everything." Understanding dawned slowly. "You weren't breaking in to cause trouble. You were testing their security." Lucas nodded, eyes fixed on his screen. "I sent them a report. They didn't like that." The next morning in the principal's office, the school's IT director confirmed Lucas's story. The breach was, well, it was actually a white hat hack. He looked uncomfortable admitting it. Lucas identified 6 critical vulnerabilities in our system, sent us detailed documentation on how to fix them. The principal's face flushed. "That doesn't excuse unauthorized access to our systems." I straightened in my chair, feeling a surge of protective indignation. "So you're not concerned that your student's private information was at risk, that my grandson, a 13-year-old, found security holes your paid professionals missed?" "Mrs. Wilson, that's hardly the point. Isn't it instead of punishing him, you should be thanking him?" I placed my hand near Lucas's shoulder, careful not to touch him without permission. If someone with malicious intent had found these vulnerabilities instead of Lucas, we'd be having a very different conversation. The principal's eyes narrowed, likely unused to being challenged by a 68-year-old grandmother. "Nevertheless, there are protocols, which apparently failed to keep your system secure. My decades as a teacher had taught me when to stand firm. Lucas acted ethically. He found problems and reported them properly. If you discipline him for this, what message does that send to other students?" The standoff ended with a compromise. Lucas would receive a verbal warning about proper channels for security testing, but no formal discipline. As we left the office, the IT director slipped Lucas his card. "We could use someone with your skills. Maybe you could consult with us sometime." Lucas pocketed the card without a word, but I caught the slight upward tilt of his mouth, not quite a smile, but close. It was the first hint that his abilities might be valued beyond our small circle. That spring, as Lucas progressed through 8th grade, his interest in digital verification intensified. He spent hours refining his system, often working late into the night. His social challenges remained. He still had few friends, still struggled with classroom participation, but his focus had found an anchor. Dr. Reynolds became more than a mentor. He became Lucas's bridge to the wider technological world. "Lucas has a rare gift," he told me during one of our check-ins. "He sees patterns in data that most people miss. He intuitively understands the architecture of information." But will it be enough? The question that haunted me slipped out before I could stop it. Enough for him to have a real life, a career independence after I'm gone. Dr. Reynolds adjusted his perpetually sliding glasses. "Margaret, I've been in computing for 40 years. I've seen technologies come and go, watched the digital revolution transform our world. And I can tell you this, Lucas's skills aren't just marketable, they're invaluable. In a world increasingly concerned with digital security and authenticity, he's developing exactly the expertise that will be in highest demand. His words offered comfort, but reality remained complicated. Lucas still melted down when his routines were disrupted. He still struggled with basic social interactions. He still needed substantial support in daily life. The gap between his extraordinary technical abilities and his challenges in other areas seemed to widen with each passing month. One April afternoon, I arrived to pick Lucas up from his session with Dr. Reynolds and found them hunched over a computer deep in conversation. Lucas was speaking animatedly, hands gesturing as he explained something on the screen. I paused in the doorway, reluctant to interrupt this rare moment of fluid communication. The pattern analysis algorithm can detect stylistic inconsistencies in text, Lucas was saying, comparing known authentic documents against questioned ones. Dr. Reynolds nodded thoughtfully. What about handwritten signatures? I'm developing a pressure pattern recognition module. It analyzes the force applied during signing, the micropauses, the acceleration patterns. Lucas clicked through several screens showing what looked like waveform analyses. Everyone's physical signing motion is unique, like a fingerprint. Even the best forgeries can't replicate it perfectly. Remarkable, Dr. Reynolds murmured. And this ties into your core verification system. Lucas nodded, finally noticing me in the doorway. He immediately quieted the animated person I'd just witnessed receding behind his usual reserve. But I had seen a glimpse of who he could be when engaged in his element. That summer, Lucas turned 14. No party, he still couldn't handle that level of social interaction, but we marked the occasion with his favorite meal and a new laptop more powerful than his old one. Dr. Reynolds joined us, bringing technical books and a vintage mechanical calculator that fascinated Lucas with its clicking gears and levers. Later that evening, after Dr. Reynolds had gone, I found Lucas in his room, surrounded by papers covered in equations and diagrams. The walls were plastered with printouts, flowcharts, and sticky notes. His computer screen scrolled with lines of code like a digital waterfall. I'd never seen his workspace in such creative chaos. "Lucas, everything okay?" He didn't look up, fingers flying across the keyboard. "Working on something important." I stepped closer, trying to make sense of the papers. Some appeared to be printouts of emails, others looked like social media screenshots. "What is all this?" Lucas hesitated, then finally turned to face me, though his eyes fixed on a point just past my shoulder. "Verification project for digital communications." "Is this for Dr. Reynolds?" He shook his head. "For me, for us." He gestured vaguely at the screen. "People lie. They make things look real when they're not." A chill ran through me as I began to understand. Did something happen at school? When Lucas didn't respond, I pressed gently. "Lucas, if someone is bothering you." "Jason Miller and his friends." The words came out flat, emotionless. "They made fake messages, made them look like they came from me." "What kind of messages?" Lucas turned back to his computer. "Bad ones, about girls, about teachers." His shoulders hunched. Everyone believed them. My heart sank. Lucas had been withdrawn lately, even by his standards, but I'd attributed it to typical teenage moodiness. I hadn't realized he was being targeted. "Have you told anyone at school?" "Tried. They didn't believe me." His hands hovered over the keyboard. "So I'm building proof, a system that can show what's real and what's fake." I wanted to reach out to comfort him with a hug, but knew he wouldn't welcome the physical contact. Instead, I sat on the edge of his bed, giving him space while staying present. "I believe you, Lucas, and I'll help you deal with this." He nodded slightly, already absorbed back into his work. I watched him for a moment, my brilliant, vulnerable grandson building digital armor against a world that misunderstood him. The unfairness of it burned in my chest, that he should have to create complex technological solutions to simply be believed. The next day, I met with the school counselor, armed with printouts Lucas had provided, showing the technical evidence of the forgeries. The counselor listened skeptically until I laid out the documentation, including IP addresses and timestamp analyses that even I didn't fully understand. "This is quite detailed," she admitted, paging through Lucas's report. "My grandson may struggle with social communication, but he understands digital communication better than most adults." I leaned forward, keeping my voice steady despite my simmering anger. These boys are bullying him in a way that's particularly cruel given his challenges. They're making him out to be someone he's not, knowing he'll struggle to defend himself verbally. The school's investigation confirmed Lucas's claims. Jason Miller and 2 other boys received suspensions, and the false messages were formally disavowed by the administration. But the damage had been done. Lucas retreated further into his coding world, finding safety and certainty in its logical rules and patterns. His verification system grew more sophisticated, expanding beyond simple authenticity checks to include analysis of writing patterns, linguistic fingerprinting, and advanced metadata validation. Dr. Reynolds, impressed by the rapid development, introduced Lucas to colleagues at the university's computer science department. What he's creating has real-world applications, Dr. Reynolds explained when I expressed concern about the growing attention. Document verification, fraud detection, digital forensics, these are critical fields in our increasingly digital society. Lucas isn't just tinkering, he's innovating. By the fall of 9th grade, Lucas's system had evolved into something Dr. Reynolds considered publishable. With some refinement, this could be submitted to technical journals, he suggested, or presented at conferences, or, he paused, choosing his words carefully, commercialized. The idea that Lucas's project might have commercial value hadn't occurred to me. I'd seen it primarily as therapeutic, his way of creating order and certainty in a confusing world. You think someone would pay for this? Margaret, companies spend millions on digital security and verification. Governments, too. What Lucas has built approaches the problem from a unique angle. Dr. Reynolds lowered his voice, though we were alone in his office. I've shown parts of his code anonymized, of course, to colleagues in the industry. They were impressed. Very impressed. As Lucas's 15th birthday approached, Dr. Reynolds suggested entering the verification system in the state technology competition. Lucas initially refused, overwhelmed by the thought of presenting to judges and crowds. But after weeks of gentle encouragement, he agreed to a compromise. He would submit the project, but Dr. Reynolds would handle the presentation if Lucas couldn't. We prepared methodically. Lucas created comprehensive documentation. We visited the venue after hours to familiarize him with the space. We practiced answers to potential questions. Still, as the competition day approached, his anxiety manifested in disrupted sleep and increased stimming behaviors, rocking, finger-flicking, humming under his breath. The morning of the competition, Lucas barely touched his breakfast, a concerning deviation from his rigid routine. As we drove to the convention center, his fingers twisted anxiously in his lap. "We can still back out," I offered. "No one would blame you." He shook his head firmly. "Important to show them. Show them what's real." The exhibition hall buzzed with activity, hundreds of students setting up displays, judges with clipboards moving methodically between booths, proud parents snapping photos. Lucas froze just inside the entrance, overwhelmed by the sensory assault. I guided him to a quiet corner where he could regulate his breathing while I collected his participant packet. Our assigned booth was thankfully along a wall, offering slightly more buffer from the crowds. Lucas set up his computer with mechanical precision, arranging everything at perfect right angles. Then he retreated behind the table, shoulders hunched, eyes down, the red toy car appearing in his hand as it always did when his stress peaked. The judges for Lucas's category arrived mid-morning, 3 stern-faced professionals with technical backgrounds. Dr. Reynolds positioned himself nearby, ready to step in if needed. I held my breath as they approached our booth. "Good morning," the lead judge said, consulting his clipboard. "You must be Lucas Wilson. Can you tell us about your project?" Lucas stared at the floor, silent. 10 seconds passed. 20. I saw the judges exchange glances, saw their expressions shifting from interest to discomfort to dismissal. Dr. Reynolds stepped forward, opening his mouth to intervene. Then Lucas spoke. "Document verification system." His voice was quiet but clear. "It analyzes digital signatures and metadata to identify forgeries." He turned to his computer fingers, finding the keyboard. "I'll demonstrate." For the next 12 minutes, Lucas walked the judges through his system, explaining the technical architecture, the verification algorithms, the error detection protocols. His voice remained soft, his eyes rarely meeting theirs, but his expertise was undeniable. The judges asked technical questions which Lucas answered with precision. They nodded, took notes, seemed genuinely engaged. When they finally moved on, Lucas collapsed into his chair, energy depleted. "You did it," I whispered, pride swelling in my chest. "You showed them." Among the observers during Lucas's presentation had been a man in a crisp suit who lingered afterward, watching Lucas from a distance. As the judges moved to the next booth, he approached us, offering a business card. Mrs. Wilson, I'm Michael Anderson, CEO of Anderson Security Solutions. I was very impressed by your grandson's presentation. I accepted the card cautiously. Thank you. Lucas has worked very hard on this project. It shows. Mr. Anderson's gaze shifted to Lucas, who was focused entirely on his computer screen, seemingly unaware of the conversation. His approach to verification is unlike anything I've seen. We'd be interested in discussing potential applications. Before I could respond, the competition organizers announced lunch break. Mr. Anderson smiled. Think about it. Call me when you're ready to talk. He walked away, leaving me staring at his card. That afternoon, Lucas won first place in the software development category and the overall innovation award. He couldn't approach the stage for the ceremony, the applause, the lights, the attention all too overwhelming, so I accepted on his behalf, heart bursting with pride and eyes welling with tears. The local technology blog covered the competition, featuring Lucas's win prominently. Teen develops revolutionary document verification system, the headline read. The article included quotes from the judges praising the innovation and potential real-world applications of the software. It was a small publication with limited reach, but it was enough. 2 days later, I received an email from Anderson Security Solutions, formally expressing interest in Lucas's verification system. The message outlined potential acquisition terms, including a substantial financial offer and ongoing consulting opportunities for Lucas. The numbers made my head spin. More money than I'd earned in my entire teaching career. When I showed Lucas the email, his reaction was characteristically subdued. They understand its value, he said, simply returning to his coding. Lucas, this is a life-changing amount of money. I tried to impress upon him the significance. It could secure your future, pay for college specialized support services, anything you might need. He nodded, not looking up from his screen. Yes, but I need conditions. What kind of conditions? I keep working on it. I keep improving it. It's not finished yet. The negotiations with Anderson Security stretched through the winter. Mr. Anderson proved surprisingly accommodating of Lucas's needs, agreeing to communicate primarily through email, holding the few necessary in-person meetings in quiet settings with minimal attendees, allowing Lucas to set the pace. Dr. Reynolds helped us navigate the technical aspects of the deal, while an attorney specializing in intellectual property ensured Lucas's interests were protected. By January, we had reached an agreement $3.2 million for Lucas's verification system, with provisions for him to continue developing it as a paid consultant, working remotely on his own schedule. The paperwork was finalized in February, the money placed in a carefully structured trust for Lucas's benefit. The week after the deal closed, a small article appeared in the local newspaper's technology section. Local teen sells software for millions, the headline announced, with a brief write-up about Lucas's innovation and its acquisition by Anderson Security. It wasn't front-page news, barely a paragraph really, but somehow it found its way to exactly the wrong eyes. 2 weeks later, the doorbell rang on a chilly March morning. I opened the door to find Rebecca standing there, nearly unrecognizable from the disheveled young woman who had left Lucas on my doorstep 11 years earlier. Her hair was perfectly styled. Her makeup flawless, her outfit expensive and carefully chosen. Beside her stood a man in an even more expensive suit, a leather portfolio tucked under his arm. "Mom," Rebecca's voice carried none of the uncertainty I remembered. "We need to talk about Lucas." I didn't invite them in immediately, my body blocking the doorway as instinctive protection surged through me. 11 years, Rebecca. 11 years without a word. Her expression didn't flicker. "I know this is unexpected. This is my attorney, William Walsh. May we come in?" "It's cold out here." I reluctantly stepped aside, leading them to the living room while my mind raced. Lucas was at school, small mercies, but he'd be home in 2 hours. I needed to understand the situation before then. Walsh set his portfolio on the coffee table, extracting a thick stack of documents. "Mrs. Wilson, my client has been unfairly separated from her son due to unfortunate circumstances. She's now in a position to resume her maternal responsibilities and wishes to formalize custody arrangements." The clinical language couldn't disguise the outrageous claim. Unfairly separated, she abandoned him, left him with a backpack, and never came back. Rebecca leaned forward, her expression rehearsed in its sincerity. "Mom, that's not what happened. I've been involved in Lucas's life all along. You know that. The circumstances were complicated. I had to work multiple jobs, travel for employment opportunities. But I always stayed connected, always provided support. My mouth fell open at the brazen lie. Connected support you haven't called once in 11 years. Walsh intervened smoothly, opening a folder. We have documentation of Ms. Wilson's ongoing involvement, financial support records, visitation logs, participation in educational decisions. He slid papers across the table, official-looking documents with dates, signatures, amounts. Ms. Wilson has maintained her parental relationship despite challenging circumstances. I picked up the nearest document, a record of supposed monthly visits dating back to 2011. My hands shook with rage and disbelief. These are forgeries, complete fabrications. Walsh's smile didn't reach his eyes. Every document is properly notarized and legally binding. Now, given Lucas's recent financial windfall, Ms. Wilson naturally wishes to ensure those assets are properly managed until he reaches maturity. As his mother, she has clear legal standing to... This is about the money. The realization crystallized with sickening clarity. You saw the article about the software sale and suddenly remembered you have a son. Rebecca's composure slipped for just a moment before she regained control. That's unfair, Mom. I've always loved Lucas. I've always tried to do what's best for him. Now that I'm in a more stable position, I can finally give him the life he deserves. The life he deserves? Indignation rose hot in my throat. He has that life already. The life I built for him while you were gone. With therapies you never attended, in schools you never visited, through challenges you never faced. Mrs. Wilson, Walsh interjected, emotions aside, the legal reality is straightforward. Rebecca Wilson is Lucas's biological mother. She has never legally surrendered her parental rights. These documents demonstrate her ongoing involvement. A family court will recognize her rightful claim to custody and financial guardianship. The threat hung in the air, explicit and chilling. They could take him from the only stable home he'd known, disrupt every routine that kept him functioning, separate him from his support network. And they could take control of his money, the security I'd fought to establish for his future. Before I could respond, the front door opened. Lucas walked in, headphones around his neck, backpack slung over one shoulder. He froze when he saw the visitors, his eyes darting between Rebecca Walsh and the documents spread across the table. Rebecca stood, her face transforming into a mask of maternal affection. Lucas, look how you've grown. Lucas didn't approach, didn't speak. His eyes fixed on the papers on the table, scanning them with unnerving intensity. You remember me, don't you? Your mom? Rebecca took a step toward him. Lucas backed away, his breathing quickening, the beginning signs of distress. I moved to intervene, but before I could reach him, Lucas spoke, his voice low and directed at me rather than the visitors. Let her talk. Let them show all their papers. I stared at him, uncomprehending. We were about to lose everything, his home, his stability, his future, and he wanted them to continue their charade. But something in his steady gaze made me pause. Lucas, who struggled with eye contact, was looking directly at me, communicating something beyond his words. Walsh, interpreting Lucas's statement as acquiescence, seized the opportunity. Lucas, your mother has maintained her relationship with you throughout these years. These documents show her regular visits, her financial contributions, her participation in your education. Lucas approached the table slowly, picking up one of the papers. He scanned it with the same methodical attention he gave to code, then set it down without comment. He looked at me again, a barely perceptible nod passing between us. I think we should continue this discussion with our attorney present, I said firmly, finding my voice again. I'll need copies of all these documents. Walsh smiled clearly, believing he had the upper hand. Of course, we've brought duplicates for you. He slid a bound stack of papers across the table. We'll expect to hear from your attorney within the week. Ms. Wilson is prepared to be generous regarding visitation arrangements during the transition period. They left shortly after Rebecca, casting one last calculated look at Lucas, who had retreated to the far corner of the room. As soon as the door closed behind them, I collapsed onto the sofa, overwhelmed by the magnitude of the threat. Lucas, I don't understand. What did you mean about letting them show their papers? Lucas approached, sitting across from me, his focus on the documents Walsh had left. They're fake, all of them. Of course they're fake, but they look real, and that's what worries me. Walsh seemed very confident. The hopelessness of our situation crashed over me. They have lawyers' money, these official-looking documents. What do we have? Lucas looked up, his expression calmer than I'd ever seen in a crisis. We have the truth, and we have my system. Understanding dawned slowly. Your verification system. You can use it to prove these documents are forgeries." He nodded, already reaching for his laptop. "That's what it was built for, to show what's real and what isn't." He opened the folder of documents, scanning the first page intently. "These were created recently, not years ago like they claim. Can you prove that in a way that would stand up in court?" Yes. His certainty was absolute. "The metadata doesn't lie. The digital signatures don't match. I can show exactly when these were created, who created them, how they were altered." Hope flickered, fragile but real. "But what about their claims that you lived with me only part-time, that Rebecca visited regularly, that she contributed financially?" A ghost of a smile crossed Lucas's face. "I've been documenting everything since I was 9. Every day, every routine, every therapy appointment, every school meeting. All time-stamped, all verified." He opened a folder on his computer, revealing thousands of files meticulously organized by date. "I built a system that makes it impossible to alter records retroactively. Everything is cross-referenced. Everything is verified." I stared at the screen, at the years of Lucas's life cataloged with precision that only his unique mind could maintain. "You've been preparing for this." "Not for this specifically." He continued scanning through the documents Walsh had left. "For anything that needed verification. For any time someone might lie about me, about us." He looked up briefly, eyes meeting mine for a rare, direct moment. "The truth matters. I made sure we could prove it." That evening I called Jerry, my old colleague from the school district whose daughter practiced family law. He put us in touch with Jennifer Reeves, a formidable attorney with experience in contested custody cases. She agreed to meet us the following day. Jennifer's office was minimalist and precise, much like her demeanor. She reviewed Rebecca's documents with a practiced eye, then listened as Lucas explained his verification system and how it could prove the forgeries. Her skepticism gradually shifted to intrigue as Lucas demonstrated the technical analysis. "This is remarkable," she admitted, paging through Lucas's preliminary findings. "I've never seen forensic document analysis this sophisticated outside of federal agencies." "Will it be enough?" The question that had haunted me since Rebecca's appearance escaped my lips. "In court against their lawyer, will it be enough?" Jennifer's expression turned grim. "Walsh has a reputation. He specializes in cases exactly like this: biological parents seeking custody of children with sudden financial windfalls. He's ruthless, and he's good." She tapped Lucas's analysis. "This helps significantly, but we need to be prepared for an ugly fight." The preparations consumed the next several weeks. Lucas worked tirelessly, applying his verification system to every document Rebecca had provided, building a comprehensive timeline of his actual life, with me gathering digital evidence to counter her claims. Jennifer assembled a legal strategy, filing motions to expedite proceedings, given the obvious bad faith of Rebecca's sudden appearance. Through it all, Lucas maintained a strange calm, as if the technical challenge of disproving the forgeries had overridden his typical anxiety. I meanwhile oscillated between rage and terror, between sleepless nights and exhausted days. The thought of losing Lucas, of him being forced into Rebecca's custody, of his money being drained away under her management, it was unbearable. Court date was set for early April. As it approached, Walsh's tactics grew more aggressive. He filed motions attempting to limit what technical evidence could be presented. He demanded psychological evaluations of both Lucas and me, suggesting my age made me an unfit guardian. He even attempted to have Lucas's verification system excluded as evidence, arguing that as a minor with autism, Lucas couldn't be considered a reliable expert witness. Jennifer countered each move with precision, but the strain was taking its toll on all of us. Lucas's carefully maintained routines began to falter. He slept less, ate irregularly, spent hours locked in his room working on his analysis. I worried the stress would trigger a major regression, undoing years of progress. The night before the hearing, I found Lucas sitting in the dark living room, his laptop screen illuminating his face with a blue glow. The clock read 2:17 a.m. "You should be sleeping," I said softly, sitting beside him on the couch. "Tomorrow is important." "I know." His fingers continued moving over the keyboard. "One last verification pass, making sure everything is perfect." I watched him work, this extraordinary young man who had overcome so many challenges to build something remarkable. Whatever happened tomorrow, I was fiercely proud of him. "Lucas, I want you to know something. Whatever the judge decides, it doesn't change who you are or what you've accomplished. Your mind, your work, your integrity, those are yours. No one can take them away." Lucas paused, hands hovering over the keyboard. I know that, Margaret. My name in his mouth still sounded strange formal. He'd only recently started using it instead of the non-address he'd employed for years. But they can't have you either. The simple declaration caught me off guard, a rare direct expression of attachment from Lucas. My eyes welled with tears. Oh, Lucas. He turned back to his work, uncomfortable with the emotional moment. We'll show them the truth tomorrow. The system doesn't fail. The next morning dawned clear and cold. Lucas wore a button-down shirt and khaki pants, his concession to courtroom formality. I chose my navy blue suit, the one I'd worn to retirement ceremonies and school board presentations, and pulled my silver hair into a neat bun. Jennifer met us at the courthouse steps, her briefcase bulging with documents and a laptop containing Lucas's verification evidence. Ready? She asked, eyes moving between us. Lucas nodded once, gripping the strap of his own computer bag. I took a deep breath, steadying myself for the battle ahead. Let's show them what's real, I said, and we walked into the courthouse together. County Courthouse, 9 a.m. My navy suit felt like armor, my silver hair pinned neatly at the nape of my neck. I walked in with Lucas and Jennifer flanking me, our footsteps echoing on the marble floor. Rebecca and Walsh were already seated at the plaintiff's table, exuding confidence. Walsh leaned over, whispering something that made Rebecca smile slightly. They didn't think we had a chance. They didn't know Lucas had spent 11 weeks building something even more powerful than the software he'd sold a system to reveal truth. The courtroom had the solemn gravity of all such spaces, polished oak benches, the American flag hanging beside the judge's bench, the hushed tones of attorneys and clerks preparing for the day's proceedings. Lucas tensed beside me as we moved to our table, overwhelmed by the unfamiliar environment. He clutched his laptop bag like a lifeline, knuckles white against the black fabric. Judge Elena Harrison entered, her dark robes flowing around her as she took her seat. At 60, she had a reputation for fairness and sharp intelligence, her 25 years on the bench evident in the efficiency with which she called the court to order. Her gaze swept over all of us, lingering briefly on Lucas before focusing on the attorneys. Wilson versus Wilson, petition for custody and financial guardianship, the clerk announced. Judge Harrison reviewed the file before her. I understand the petitioner, Rebecca Wilson, is seeking to establish custody of her minor son, Lucas Wilson, age 16, and to assume management of his financial assets. Is that correct? Walsh rose smoothly. That's correct, Your Honor. My client is Lucas's biological mother, who has maintained her relationship with him despite challenging circumstances. We have documentation of her ongoing involvement and financial support. Jennifer stood next. Your Honor, we vigorously dispute those claims. Rebecca Wilson abandoned Lucas with his grandmother 11 years ago and has had no contact since. The documents purporting to show her involvement are fraudulent. Judge Harrison's expression remained neutral. Serious allegations, Counselor. I presume you have evidence to support them. We do, Your Honor. Comprehensive and conclusive evidence. The judge nodded once. Very well. Mr. Walsh, present your case. Walsh approached the bench with practiced confidence, outlining Rebecca's claims in a narrative designed to evoke sympathy. A young mother struggling with her son's diagnosis. Financial hardship forcing difficult choices. A supportive arrangement with the grandmother that allowed Rebecca to work and build a more stable life while remaining involved in Lucas's care. The documents before you, Your Honor, detail Ms. Wilson's regular visitation, financial contributions, and participation in educational decisions over the past 11 years. Walsh gestured toward the thick binder he'd submitted to the court. Now that Ms. Wilson has achieved stability in her career and personal life, she wishes to formalize the arrangement and provide Lucas with the maternal care and guidance he deserves, particularly given his recent financial windfall, which requires mature oversight. Rebecca took the stand next, her testimony a masterpiece of calculated emotion. Tears appeared at perfect moments. Her voice caught when describing Lucas's challenges. She spoke of monthly visits, money orders sent for therapy, phone calls on birthdays and holidays. She described specific events in vivid detail, a December 2013 visit when they decorated my Christmas tree together, an April 2015 trip to his doctor's appointment, a summer 2018 outing to the zoo. I never abandoned my son. Rebecca's voice cracked convincingly. I did what I had to do to survive and build a better life for both of us. My mother helped raise him, yes, but I was always present, always involved. And now I'm ready to take on my full responsibility as his mother. Jennifer's cross-examination was surgical. You claim you visited regularly beginning in January 2011. Did you document these visits? I kept a journal. Rebecca dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. And the calendar records submitted to the court. And the financial support you have receipts for these money orders. Of course, they're included in the documentation. How interesting. Jennifer's tone shifted slightly. And did you attend Lucas's IEP meetings at school? Whenever I could. My mother would fill in when my work schedule conflicted. Each answer dug Rebecca deeper into her fabrication. Jennifer didn't challenge the lies directly, just accumulated them like gathering storm clouds. When Rebecca finally stepped down, she looked relieved, even confident, exchanging a small smile with Walsh. I testified next, recounting the truth of the past 11 years. The abandonment, the silence, the struggle to learn how to parent a child with autism, the therapies, the meltdowns, the slow progress, the breakthroughs, the absolute absence of Rebecca throughout. Mrs. Wilson, Walsh began his cross-examination with exaggerated patience. At your age, memory can be unreliable. Are you absolutely certain your daughter never visited, never called, never contributed financially? The condescension in his tone made my spine stiffen. Mr. Walsh, I remember every single day of the past 11 years. When you are the only person a child has to rely on, you don't have the luxury of forgetting. Walsh changed tactics, questioning my ability to continue caring for Lucas. Mrs. Wilson, you're 68 years old. Lucas may require support for decades to come. Isn't it possible that your resistance to Ms. Wilson's custody petition stems from your own attachment issues rather than Lucas's best interests? Jennifer objected sharply. Argumentative and ageist, Your Honor. Sustained. Judge Harrison frowned at Walsh. Counsel will refrain from making assumptions about the witness's capacity based on age. Walsh pressed on. Mrs. Wilson, how can you possibly manage a teenager with autism at your age, the physical demands alone? Lucas doesn't need physical restraint, Mr. Walsh. He needs understanding, consistency, and support, things I've provided for 11 years while your client was absent. The words came out sharper than intended, my patience fraying under his implications. When I finally stepped down, exhaustion weighed on me. Walsh looked smugly confident, Rebecca perfectly composed. The morning session ended with the submission of their documentation, visitation logs, financial records, notes from supposed educational consultations, all meticulously prepared, all utterly fictional. During the lunch recess, Jennifer huddled with us in a small conference room. They're making a compelling narrative. The documentation looks professional. If we can't definitively prove their forgeries, Judge Harrison might err on the side of biological parenthood. Lucas, who had been silent throughout the morning, finally spoke. I can prove it. I need to testify. Jennifer hesitated. Lucas testifying means answering questions from both sides. Walsh will be aggressive, confusing. He'll try to provoke an emotional response. I know. Lucas opened his laptop, fingers hovering over the keyboard. But I have the proof. I need to show it. Back in session, Jennifer called our final witness. Your Honor, we call Lucas Wilson to the stand. Walsh immediately objected. Your Honor, Lucas Wilson is a minor with documented developmental disabilities. His testimony cannot be considered reliable. Judge Harrison's eyes narrowed. Mr. Walsh, I will determine the reliability of witnesses in my courtroom. The young man may testify. She turned toward Lucas with a gentler expression. Are you comfortable answering questions, Lucas? Lucas nodded, his gaze fixed on a point just above the judge's head. Yes, Your Honor. As Lucas took the stand, a ripple of whispers moved through the small audience. The unusual sight of a teenager with autism testifying in his own custody case had drawn attention from court staff and a few local reporters. Rebecca leaned forward, watching intently as Lucas positioned himself in the witness chair, his laptop clutched against his chest. Lucas, Jennifer began gently, do you recognize the woman claiming to be your mother? Lucas glanced briefly at Rebecca. I recognize her from photographs. She left when I was 5. I haven't seen her since. She claims to have visited you regularly, at least monthly, for the past 11 years. Is that true? No. She never came back after November 14, 2010. Walsh scribbled notes furiously, preparing for cross-examination. Jennifer continued. Lucas, we've heard a lot about documentation today, about records and papers. You've created a computer program that verifies documents, is that right? Yes, a digital verification system. It analyzes metadata, timestamps, signature patterns, and linguistic markers to authenticate digital and digitized documents. And this system was valuable enough that Anderson Security Solutions purchased it for $3.2 million. Yes, with ongoing development rights. Jennifer nodded. Have you had an opportunity to analyze the documents submitted by Ms. Wilson and Mr. Walsh? Yes. Lucas set his laptop on the small table beside the witness stand. May I demonstrate, Your Honor? Judge Harrison nodded, curiosity evident in her expression. You may. A court technician connected Lucas's laptop to the courtroom's display system. The screen came to life, showing a detailed analysis interface. Lucas began his presentation, his voice gaining strength and clarity as he entered his element. These documents claim to be from 2011 through 2020, Lucas explained, clicking through screens of technical data. But the digital metadata shows they were created 6 weeks ago, right after the news story about my software sale aired. Walsh stood immediately. Objection: metadata can be manipulated. Not in this case, Lucas continued calmly. The signature verification shows additional discrepancies. He pulled up Rebecca's signature from his birth certificate, then ran a program that analyzed the signatures on the custody documents. Numbers appeared, comparison statistical analyses. The pressure patterns don't match. The letter formation is inconsistent. The spacing and slant are different. These signatures were forged. Judge Harrison leaned forward, interest piqued. How do you know this? This system you've created, how does it work? I built a verification system that analyzes documents for authenticity. It's what I sold last month. Lucas's voice remained steady, technical terms flowing naturally. But I've been documenting my life since I was 9 years old. He pulled up a new screen showing a complex timeline. These are my records. I've been documenting my life since I was 9 years old. Spreadsheets, scanned documents, photographs, all time-stamped, all verified. Ms. Wilson claims she visited in December 2013. Here's my grandmother's calendar from that month showing our schedule. Here are photos from that week with timestamps. Here's my therapy session notes from December 9th. Therapist confirmed no mother present. Lucas clicked through more screens with methodical precision. Here's the school attendance record showing I was present every day that month. December 2013, Rebecca wasn't there. The courtroom had fallen completely silent, all eyes fixed on the display, as Lucas systematically dismantled Rebecca's claims one by one. Ms. Wilson claims she sent money orders. Here are 7 years of my grandmother's complete bank records. No deposits from Rebecca Wilson. Not $1. Bank statements appeared on screen, every transaction highlighted, every source documented. Nothing from Rebecca. Ms. Wilson claims she called regularly. Here are phone company records from 2010 to present. 0 calls from her number after December 24, 2010. Phone records spanning years, Rebecca's number nowhere to be found. April 2015. She claims she sent $500 for therapy. Here's the bank statement showing no such deposit. Here's my grandmother's calendar showing she paid out of pocket. Here's the receipt. For nearly 30 minutes, Lucas continued his methodical presentation, demolishing every claim Rebecca had made with irrefutable evidence. The comprehensive nature of his documentation was staggering. Every calendar entry, every receipt, every therapy session, every school meeting, all time-stamped and cross-referenced. Walsh rose again, desperation edging into his voice. Your Honor, this evidence wasn't disclosed in discovery. Because you presented fraudulent documents 6 weeks ago, Lucas replied before Jennifer could intervene. I built the verification system to analyze them. That's impossible, Walsh sputtered. You couldn't build something like this in 6 weeks. I didn't, Lucas said simply. I've been building it for 7 years. I just finished analyzing these specific documents 6 weeks ago. Judge Harrison studied him with newfound respect. You've been documenting your life for 7 years. Yes, Your Honor. Every calendar entry my grandmother made, every receipt she kept, every therapy session, every school meeting, every bank transaction, everything is time-stamped, cross-referenced, and verified. The system makes it impossible to alter retroactively. Lucas pulled up more screens showing the judge how the system worked, how each document connected to others, how the verification codes proved nothing had been changed. So when Ms. Wilson says she visited monthly, sent money, called regularly, I can prove she didn't, because I have proof of what actually happened. What was real? The courtroom fell silent. Judge Harrison looked at Rebecca, whose face had drained of color. "Ms. Wilson, can you explain these discrepancies?" Rebecca glanced desperately at Walsh. "The metadata could be wrong," she stammered. "The dates might be… I did visit. I did send money." "When exactly?" Judge Harrison's voice had cooled considerably. "In December 2013, I remember. Do you have proof receipts, photos, anything?" Rebecca faltered. "I didn't keep records. I was there. I know I was there." "But you have detailed financial records of money orders sent." "Yes, those show." She was contradicting herself, the confident woman from earlier, crumbling under the weight of exposed lies. Judge Harrison's expression hardened. "Ms. Wilson, did you or did you not falsify custody documents?" No, my lawyer said." Rebecca looked desperately toward Walsh, who stared straight ahead, his own career visibly flashing before his eyes. Judge Harrison turned back to Lucas. "This verification system, it's legitimate, professionally recognized." "Yes, Your Honor. I sold it last month to Anderson Security for $3.2 million. They verified its accuracy before purchase." Lucas's matter-of-fact statement hung in the air, the sheer magnitude of his achievement underscoring the credibility of his evidence. The judge studied the evidence once more, examining the timeline, the proof that Rebecca had been absent for 11 years. "I've seen enough," she declared, her voice cutting through the tension. She ruled from the bench, no recess, no deliberation necessary. "Rebecca Wilson, I find your testimony not credible and your documentation fraudulent. Full custody and guardianship is awarded to Margaret Wilson. Furthermore, I'm referring this case to the district attorney for investigation of perjury and fraud." Rebecca made a choked sound. The gavel struck with finality. "This hearing is adjourned." Outside the courthouse, standing in the afternoon sun, the magnitude of what had just occurred washed over me. Lucas stood beside me, his posture already relaxing now that the ordeal was behind us. "You knew," I finally said. "You've been protecting us all along." Lucas nodded once, a small definitive movement. Not a smile, just acknowledgement. In that moment, I understood that his verification system had never been just about proving document authenticity or catching forgeries. It had been about creating certainty in an uncertain world, about establishing truth when words failed him. 6 months passed. Life settled into new rhythms. Lucas couldn't work in data security anymore. The non-compete clause from selling his verification system was clear. So he started a new company, software testing and quality assurance. "I'm hiring people like me," he explained one morning over his precisely arranged breakfast. "Autistic people. We see patterns others miss." His first hire was Stephen Garcia, a name I recognized immediately. Stephen had been my student 20 years ago, a bright boy with autism who'd struggled in traditional classrooms. I'd fought the school board for him in 4th grade when they wanted to place him in a more restricted environment. They'd said he would never hold a job. Now he was Lucas's lead quality tester. Then came Marcus, then Lily, more former students of mine, whom the world had underestimated. Children, now adults, whom people had given up on. Lucas found them, recognized their unique abilities, created an environment where they could thrive. I visited Lucas's office one afternoon in October. A small space, 6 desks, everyone wearing headphones, quiet, focused. Stephen saw me, removed his headphones. "Mrs. Wilson, you told the principal I wasn't broken, just different." His voice cracked with emotion. "Lucas says the same thing." I couldn't speak, just nodded, throat tight with unexpected emotion. Rebecca received 2 years probation and 500 hours of community service at an autism resource center. 3 months into her sentence, I was dropping off donated supplies and saw her sitting on the floor reading to nonverbal children. She looked up, saw me. We both froze. She looked exhausted, humbled, nothing like the woman who'd appeared with a lawyer at my door. The center director approached me, not knowing who I was. "That volunteer comes in extra hours," she commented. "Says she's learning what she should have learned years ago." I didn't speak to Rebecca, just watched for a moment, then left. Some things don't need words. On a Tuesday evening, a few weeks later, I brought dinner to Lucas's apartment, as I always did. His yellow cup sat on the counter, chipped, but still his favorite. We ate at his small table, our comfortable silence punctuated only by the sounds of forks against plates. I started clearing dishes when Lucas set down his phone. "Margaret?" I turned, surprised by the direct address. He was looking at his hands. "I know what you gave up for me." I sat back down, waiting. Lucas rarely initiated conversation this personal. When he did, it deserved full attention. Your friend stopped calling. You stopped going places. His words came slowly, carefully chosen. I heard you on the phone once turning down a trip because you couldn't leave me. Lucas, you could have sent me away like she did. School suggested it. You didn't. My throat constricted. You're my grandson. I know. He looked up at me, a momentary meeting of eyes. But you chose it every day, even when I couldn't say thank you. Silence fell between us, just the hum of his refrigerator in the background. It mattered, he said quietly. I reached across the table, placed my hand near his, not touching, but close. You were worth every single day. He nodded once. I know that now. We sat a moment longer, then I rose, finished the dishes while he opened his laptop. Same routine, same comfortable silence, but something important had been said. I kissed the top of his head on my way out. He didn't flinch. See you Tuesday, I said. Tuesday. He confirmed the word, both acknowledgement and promise. I drove home through streets I'd traveled 1,000 times before. Same route, same turns. The way Lucas liked things, the way I'd learned to like things too. My phone buzzed at a red light, a text from Lucas. Thank you. Just those 2 words. I smiled the whole way home, the weight of 17 years lifting with each mile. When I'd opened my door to Rebecca and Lucas that November day, I couldn't have imagined where the journey would lead. I couldn't have foreseen that the nonverbal 5-year-old with the yellow cup would grow into a young man who would change not just his own life, but the lives of others like him. I couldn't have known that in trying to give Lucas a place in the world, he would create a whole new world where he and others like him belonged. At home, I sat on my porch swing watching the sunset paint the sky in gradients of color that reminded me of Lucas's toy cars arranged so carefully years ago. I thought about the nature of love, how it exists in the spaces between words, in the offering of a yellow cup, in the steady presence day after day after day. How it reveals itself not in grand gestures, but in the choice to stay, to learn to adapt, to believe in possibilities others can't see. So many people had underestimated Lucas, his mother, his teachers, the world. Even I, in moments of fear and exhaustion, had wondered if he could ever build an independent life. We had all been wrong. The boy who couldn't speak at 5 was employing others at 16. The child people thought would always be dependent was creating opportunities for those society had dismissed. My phone buzzed again. A message from Dr. Reynolds. Lucas just showed me the prototype for his new accessibility software. Remarkable. You should be proud. I typed back, I am. Every day. The night deepened around me, stars appearing one by one. I thought about Rebecca, about forgiveness, about second chances. Was redemption possible after such profound abandonment? I didn't know. But seeing her at the autism center making different choices, perhaps that was a beginning. I thought about Lucas's words. You chose it every day. He was right. Love is a daily choice, not a single moment. 1,000 small decisions that add up to a life shared, difficulties faced, joys celebrated. In choosing Lucas every day for 11 years, I'd found parts of myself I never knew existed. Strength, patience, advocacy, a fierce protective instinct that surprised even me. And Lucas had chosen too. Chosen to trust me when words failed him. Chosen to build systems to make sense of a confusing world. Chosen to use his unique mind not just for his own benefit, but to create spaces where others could succeed. His choices had transformed both our lives. The porch swing creaked gently as I rocked, memories washing over me. Lucas lining up cars in perfect gradients. Lucas bringing me the yellow cup when I cried. Lucas writing his first program. Lucas testifying in court with calm precision. Lucas hiring Stephen and giving him the chance no one else would. My grandson who people said would never succeed. My grandson who built $1 million verification system and used it to protect what mattered most. My grandson who proved that different didn't mean less. It often meant more. The phone buzzed once more. Lucas again, working on new project. Will show you Tuesday. I typed back, looking forward to it, knowing he meant both the project and our regular dinner. Knowing that these simple exchanges represented hard-won connection that many had thought impossible. Night settled fully around my little house, the same house where I'd raised Lucas, where I'd taught him to navigate the world and he'd taught me to see it differently. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. More dinners to prepare, more routines to maintain, More advocacy, more explanations to people who didn't understand autism or the remarkable minds it sometimes produced. But tonight, in this moment, everything was as it should be. Lucas was safe, thriving in his own way. I was here watching over him still, but from a distance that honored his growing independence. The yellow cup, chipped but cherished, still held its place in both our lives, a silent testament to communication beyond words, to connection that defied conventional understanding. So that's my story, I whispered to the night sky. I'd love to hear what you think. If you were in my shoes, could you forgive your own daughter for abandoning your grandson? The question lingered unanswered, but worth asking, worth considering. Perhaps someday I'd have an answer. For now, I had Lucas's text, "Thank you." 2 simple words that contained worlds of meaning. 2 words that made 11 years of challenges worthwhile. 2 words that confirmed what I'd always believed, that love, patient and persistent, could bridge any gap, even one as vast and complex as autism. I went inside, turned off the porch light, and prepared for tomorrow. Tuesday would come. Lucas would be waiting. Life would continue its imperfect, beautiful journey. And somewhere in the midst of routines and rituals of codes and connections, we would find our way forward together, grandmother and grandson, different, but perfectly matched. In the end, Lucas had built more than a verification system. He'd built a bridge between his world and mine, between what people thought possible and what actually was, between the boy with the yellow cup and the young man changing lives. That bridge, more than any software or bank account, was his greatest creation, and helping him build it step by patient step over 11 years was mine.